Madhavi, a young woman from a small village, arrived at Rosewood Girls' Hostel with excitement and optimism. She had left behind the simplicity of rural life to come to Calcutta, hoping to build a future in the city. Rosewood Hostel, an old, imposing building, seemed like the perfect place for her to start. She worked at a nearby hotel as a part-time waitress, keeping busy with her shifts and studies. It was a calm and routine life. The building, with its old wooden floors and tall stone walls, creaked from time to time, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The hostel had a sprawling courtyard. The presence of the watchman, Mr. Das, gave her a sense of security. It seemed like the perfect place to spend her days. But as the days went on, things began to change. It all started after one particularly late shift at the hotel. Madhavi returned to the hostel around 11:30 in the evening, exhausted but ready to get some rest. She entered the main courtyard, her footsteps echoing in the silent night. That's when she first heard it, a soft whisper, so faint it could have been the wind, but it was so distinct, someone calling her name. In the following days, the incidents grew more frequent. At first, it was little things, faint sounds that she couldn't quite place, shadows in the corners of her eyes that vanished when she looked directly at them. But then the boots began. The distinct sound of military boots, heavy, deliberate, echoed through the halls of the hostel, growing louder each time. Madhavi would be in the corridor walking to her room, and suddenly the boots would sound behind her, their rhythmic march growing closer. When she turned around, no one was there. Once she saw in the courtyard, a figure appeared under the moonlight, standing rigid, dressed in an old British soldier uniform. His face was obscured by shadows, but Madhavi could see the glint of his silver buttons and the high collar of his uniform. The whispers came next, soft, almost unintelligible voices, as if someone was speaking just outside her door. Madhavi would lay in her bed, exhausted from her shifts at the hotel, when she would hear faint murmurs. It was as if someone was standing in the hallway, talking to themselves. But when she opened her door, there was no one there. One evening, after a long shift, she went to take a shower in the old washroom on the lower floor. She suddenly heard soft footsteps outside the bathroom door. They were too close. She froze. The door handle rattled slightly, and a cold shiver ran down her spine. "Madhavi!" a low voice whispered. She rushed out of the shower, clutching the towel around her body, but no one was there. Yet the air was thick with a presence, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. One night she was sleeping. She felt something crawling on her back. She tried to brush it away, but after some time she felt it again, and then something started to shake her bed. She jumped up, her heart racing, but when she looked there was nothing. Madhavi ran to the neighbouring room of her friend, Kiran. "Kiran, something's wrong with this place," she cried, her voice trembling. Kiran, always the sceptical one, tried to calm her down, but even she couldn't ignore the strange chill that filled the air. As they sat huddled together, praying softly, the feeling of being surrounded by unseen eyes intensified. Suddenly, a figure appeared at the door. A man, his body covered in bandages, his face hidden behind the wrappings. He stood motionless, staring at them, with an intensity that froze them both in place. Then, without a sound, he turned and disappeared down the stairs. The next morning, the two girls summoned the hostel's warden, Mrs. Dutta, and explained what had happened. She seemed unfazed, but when they insisted, she told them a story that chilled them to the bone. Years ago, the Rosewood building had been a military hospital during the British Raj. The courtyard was the site of many gruesome treatments, and soldiers wounded in battle were brought here, some of them never leaving. There had been reports of strange occurrences, screams in the night, figures in the hallways and soldiers seen wandering the grounds. The British soldiers had left long ago, but it seemed that the spirits of those who had died there had never found peace. Determined to put an end to the terrifying episodes, Madhavi and Kiran convinced Mrs. Dutta to call in a priest. Father Rajan arrived later that week, bringing with him a sense of calm that the girls had been longing for. After a long prayer and a blessing of the building, the heavy presence seemed to fade. The strange occurrences slowed down, and the atmosphere lightened. But the damage had already been done. Madhavi could no longer ignore what she had experienced. The sounds, the figures, the whispers in the night, they had taken a toll on her. She could no longer sleep peacefully. 1 week after Father Rajan's visit, Madhavi packed her belongings and left the hostel, not looking back. Kiran, though she stayed on for a few months, eventually left too, unable to ignore the lingering sense of dread. Soon after Madhavi's departure, rumours spread that the Rosewood hostel had become too much of a liability. The incidents, both subtle and violent, continued to unsettle the girls. The wailing of unseen soldiers at night, the bandaged figure roaming the halls, and the cold presence that would follow anyone down the corridors made it impossible for the hostel to continue operating. By the following year, the Rosewood hostel was closed, its doors sealed tight. The girls who had once lived there now scattered across the city. But the building didn't remain abandoned for long. A year later, the property was repurposed again, this time into a boys' school. The rumours surrounding the building persisted, though. Locals claimed that the boys who attended the school often reported seeing strange figures in the corners of their eyes, hearing footsteps in empty hallways, and feeling an inexplicable chill whenever they ventured near the old washrooms. The ghosts of Rosewood, it seemed, had not been banished so easily. The soldiers, lost and forgotten, still roamed the halls, eternally tied to the building that had once served as their final resting place. As for Madhavi, the night she left Rosewood marked the end of her time at the hostel, but not the end of the hauntings. The building, now a boys' school, still stood, and though the soldiers' spirits no longer plagued the girls who lived there, they had not been laid to rest. The sounds of military boots still echoed in the halls from time to time, and occasionally someone would hear whispers in the wind or see the faint outline of a bandaged figure standing by the washroom steps.